So Kathy, did you want to begin?
Oh, hi, you're welcome. Let's see, I guess I'm Kathy Baylor. I'm on the I'm a legislative liaison on the Washington PAC, and with me is Amber. And Amber, you're a treasurer at the state level, yeah?
Yeah. So I wear two hats. I'm a board member on the Seattle chapter for the National Organization for Women. I'm the immediate past president, and then I'm also on the Washington State chapter, which kind of funnels up through, like it goes local chapter, state chapter, and then national chapter. And so I'm the treasurer on the Washington State Now chapter. It looks like we have one more guest joining us too, so we'll let Stacy get settled in too. Great. Good morning, Stacy.
Good morning, Stacy. Hi.
Good morning.
So I just want to remind everybody, I know you get a little notification, but remind everybody that we're recording. And this recording is going to be available for you to watch later, and for anyone who wasn't able to come here as well, so that they can benefit from the training too. So there we go. You want to go, Amber?
Yeah. Okay. Did I change the slide? Okay. Does it look all right?
Yes, you made it much prettier than I had it. It looks beautiful.
I didn't change the slide. I meant I moved it. Okay. So thank you for joining us today. Stacy, I know that we haven't had a chance to say hello or introduce ourselves yet. I'm Amber. I'm on the Seattle chapter for the National Organization for Women, and I'm also on the Washington State chapter. And together, Kathy and I are serving in our volunteer capacity for the Washington State Now PAC. So today we're going to go through how to volunteer specifically for the candidate endorsement process that the Washington State Now PAC, the Political Action Committee, does. So we'll talk about why we have a PAC, how the PAC board process works and its rules. Then we'll kind of go through how we identify candidates to interview, so then we can decide if we want to provide endorsements and kind of what happens after that. So the key piece that you as volunteers will be able to help us with today is setting up the interviews, and then interviewing the candidates, and the screening and interview process with your recommendation for endorsements after that. Once we kind of come up with our endorsements, then we have a calendar laid out so we can stay on top of the upcoming primary elections, as well as the upcoming general elections. So does anybody have any questions on our agenda for this morning? Okay.
So we were going to be joined by the Now chair and PAC chair, Cheryl Wapesha Mays, but I believe she's out doing important work on the streets, pro-choice work. So I'm going to provide you with a land acknowledgement for our meeting today. Hishlu. Hello and good morning. Let us acknowledge today that as we walk through our daily lives, we inhabit land where Native people lived, laughed, loved, played, and died for millennia. The land is made of the bones, blood, villages, and memories that they carried with them. Let us honor that as we do our work today. Lemlinch. Thank you.
Kathy, that was so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so why do we have a political action committee? Well, the National Organization for Women, as you may or may not know, I'm not sure if either of you have had a chance, the two volunteers that are joining us today or the ones that are joining us on recording later, have been to any of our volunteer orientations. But we are a grassroots feminist organization, which means that any endorsements that we get for candidates kind of originate from our specific NOW members on the ground where the races are taking place. So that's your, in this season, it's your local representatives and senators, as well as like Secretary of State and other types of positions there. Local, state, and federal NOW endorsements are super valuable because it helps assure voters that the candidates that they're looking at are taking uncompromising stances on feminist issues, issues that are important to us in this feminist activist space. No other PACs expect candidates to take such strong stands on such a wide range of issues. These issues include, but are by no means limited to, something that's specifically happening for us today, and that's reproductive rights and justice. As you may know, that while we're here in our computers today, there's a lot of women and allies on the streets trying to make our voices heard up through the Supreme Court level, because we really want to make sure that reproductive rights and justice for women are front and center. We also care about economic justice for women and making sure that we can lift all women and families up. A topic that's super important too that we care about is ending violence against women. That can also include police violence, right? It's not just domestic partner violence. It's not just stranger violence. It happens in a lot of ways. We care about racial justice for women. There's a lot of women in this world that need that extra support from us. We care about LGBTQIA+ rights, as well as constitutional equality. That means getting the Equal Rights Amendment passed and set in stone. The National NOW PAC endorses for federal races. So that's going to be your Maria Cantwell, your senators and legislators that we elect here in the state that go to Washington, D.C. The Washington State NOW PAC endorses for non-federal races in Washington State, which, as you know, are super important to keep us as a very progressive state with values that align with us here. So PACs are kind of funny. There are a lot of laws and regulations about who we can endorse, amounts, and transparency regarding donations and endorsements for candidates running for office. For these reasons, local chapters do not endorse, just the PACs, so that we can maintain compliance with the laws and IRS regulations. One thing that you'll need to know, is once we endorse a candidate, we do provide them with a small, large for us, small for them, donation to their race as well, depending on how many endorsements we get and how much funds we have. But in order to do that, in order to continue to be an active PAC, we need to have many donations from a lot of people in the state, not just like one giant PAC, one giant donation. So if you get a plea for a donation, we just need, I think it's like 20 $10 donations during the course of a fundraising season, so we can keep our PAC going. So just even a $10 donation to our PAC is super helpful. Ooh, I went too far.
Okay, so the PAC has a board. It's made up of 7 members, and those members are our president, Cheryl Wapesha Mays from the Tacoma chapter, who is also the Washington State NOW chair. Our treasurer, Linda Tosti Lane from the Seattle chapter. And there are 5 other members, at-large members from across, that make up a cross-section of the state. Heidi Dobson from the Blue Mountain chapter, Lynn Swanson from the Tacoma chapter, Katrina Wincoop Simmons from the Thurston chapter, Linda Malinchek Finnan from the Thurston County chapter, and Kathy, me, from the Seattle chapter. So the other slide, the other items up here talk about protocols that we follow with the interviews. I'm going to talk first about the screening questionnaire. A screening questionnaire is sent out to every candidate before they are interviewed. Only candidates who answer yes on all the bottom line issues will be offered an interview. So this is a 10 question screening questionnaire that covers all the 6 bottom line now issues that Amber just talked about. You know, the Washington State Now endorsement is highly sought after by candidates for one reason, because it has money and they're all looking for money, but also this screening process really assures that the integrity of the endorsement is in place. It really means something, because for years, the Washington State Now PAC has been good about maintaining high standards for our candidates. Then let's talk about the interviews themselves. Local members are encouraged to conduct their own interviews. So for instance, I'm from the 32nd Legislative District, and my guess is that I will be interviewing legislators from the 32nd Legislative District. That's to the greatest degree possible. We don't have, you know, sometimes we don't have a volunteer from that area, and so we do the best that we can, but we try to do that. All interviews should have 2 interviewers whenever possible. This is a really good idea. I've done interviews once. I did 3 interviews last year, and being able to split the work out and having someone to bounce your ideas off is really great. Also, during the interview process, you'll hear about this later, but we usually suggest that one person ask the questions and another person take notes. Makes it a little easier. Down to local races, interview forms are available for legislative races, judicial, and other state, county, and city positions. So that means that there are different forms for different races. A legislator gets one kind of form, a judicial person gets another kind of form. And so you got to watch that be a little bit careful about that when you send the forms out to people to make sure they get the right one. It says local chapters must be involved in the interviews. So of course we do that. And no cash donations would be considered in a local race unless the candidate is a NOW member and activist. So our candidates, if they want to receive our endorsement, they need to be a member of NOW. I'm going to reiterate what Amber said before. This says only the Washington State NOW PAC can make candidate endorsements. So interviewers make recommendations about candidates. Interviewers say, we recommend that this person be endorsed, but they do not make the actual endorsements. The endorsements come from the PAC, and I believe that's by law. Am I right, Amber? Yeah, that's
right.
Because of the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Did I get it all, Amber, or do you need to add anything?
I think so. You know, the only thing I might add is that National Organization for Women, from the PAC to the local chapters, we are nonpartisan. So we are not, we don't lean in any political direction except for feminist values. Just make sure I reiterate that point.
Thank you.
Which brings us to the next question. How do we screen for candidates? So just a quick primer on the election cycle. So in odd years, there's tons of elections, but those are going to be really, really localized elections. Think of like your school board, your city council, maybe mayor races, like that kind of stuff is going to happen in Washington on odd years. Even years like this year are the statewide elections and legislative elections here in Washington State. So that's going to be, like I said, your state senators, your state legislators that go to Olympia. There's also a lot of statewide offices, such as Secretary of State, city attorneys for like Seattle, et cetera. They will be, those types of races are also happening this year. So screening questionnaires are going to be sent to all of the candidates for the identified races, unless we look at the candidate's website and they specifically say something like, we are pro-life, or something that's clearly against our values. So we will send, if we can identify on that side somebody who might not be congruent with our values, then we won't send them a questionnaire. But if we can, but in all other cases, we will send a screening questionnaire to that candidate. And once they return it to us, the screening questionnaire must have all yes responses. It's pretty easy. So like when you answered. If the candidate can't honestly say yes, that they will, support funding abortion, then we will not be interviewing them. Who does this work? Kathy does this work, and Cheryl with Patient Mays does this work. So they are the primary two folks responsible for getting all the candidates lists in order, sending out the screening questionnaires, collecting that information, and then returning the past screening questionnaires to the local chapters for then the next step of the interviews, which is kind of where I come from, the Seattle Now chapter, to help organize the candidate volunteers, the volunteers for candidate interviews for the Seattle chapter there. Yeah.
Thank you, Amber. I also want to acknowledge one other person, Linda Tosti Lane, who has been doing this job for decades. This will be her last year doing the job that I'll be doing, but she's going to be helping me. She would have been here today, but she's in Europe. And so she's also doing that work.
Oh, Kathy, oh my gosh, how did I forget about Linda Tosti Lane?
But you're recorded.
She is the sole person that has progressed the Washington State Now PAC for the last 40 years. She's an amazing woman. So shout out to Linda.
She is, and believe me, I'm with great temerity, I step into her very large boots. Okay, so let's talk about setting up the interviews. After the candidates have been identified, the candidates that we will interview through the screening process, the volunteers will be receiving the names of the candidates and then the forms that they have to send to them. And they'll be setting up the interviews with the candidates. They'll contact each candidate and then send and set up that interview, and then send them a confirmation email. And they'll send at the same time 2 documents, a Part 1 questionnaire, which is a Word document, and a Part 2 questionnaire, which is a PDF document. So that the Word document will be completed, sort of the written part of their test, right? It'll be completed by either them or their campaign. And then they'll be expected to send that back to you. The Part 2 questionnaire is the questions you'll be asking them in the interview. And, this is not, we want them to read the questions and give us thoughtful answers. So we have full disclosure. This is what we will be asking you. They don't send that back to you, but when they come and meet with you at the interview, you'll be asking those questions. And as I said, one person probably should ask and the other person write down the answers. You will need to make sure that you get the Part 1 questionnaire back from them, and that can be a little bit tricky. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy. As a reminder, when we send out the candidates, you and your partner, whoever you get paired with for your volunteering together, will get that email together. So you and that person will need to have communication via email for somebody you probably never met before. So just know that can be part of the fun, is you get to work with somebody you haven't met before to volunteer. So once you and your volunteer and the candidate have identified when you're having the interview, you have the interview. A lot of times in the last few years, we've been doing it virtually. Maybe perhaps it might work best for you guys to do it in person. You do what makes most sense for you. One tip that we have learned that some people do is, if it's a virtual meeting, maybe you choose to record it, so that way you can come back and kind of think through, like, okay, so how did they answer that question? That's an option, however it makes sense for you. So one person typically will take notes. I like to take notes on paper and then transfer it to the form. Some people like to take notes, typing it in while they talk. So just whatever makes the most sense for you. But we do ask that the completed package includes, the typed out interview responses in there too. We have one woman that volunteers with us who does prefer to ask the questions and another person take notes, because it's kind of challenging for her to make the notes. So what's really important is that all questions need to be asked, even if the question is marked optional. I mean, unless it's marked optional or for incumbents only, but we want to make sure we're giving every candidate the same type of questions. And you do need to, when you finish your interview and you've taken your notes and you've filled out your report, submit the questionnaire package, which is part 1 and part 2, back to us. You can send it to the email addresses listed here, washingtonstatepresident@gmail.com and Washington State Now Legislative Alerts @gmail.com. Don't worry, when you get assigned a candidate, you will definitely have these emails in there for you too. But we need part 1 and part 2 back for that. Yeah. Does anybody have questions on the interview portion? Okay, cool. We must be doing so good, Kathy.
Yeah, we are. Okay, so this is just a shot of the Google Docs, the Google Drive page where all these documents reside. You'll be sent copies of the part 1 and the part 2 and all the email and a link to this page. This is just sort of a backup in case you need to get in there to reprint out documents or anything like that. I do want to say about the part 1 and the part 2 that they're different for different candidates. So there's a legislative form, a judicial form, a congressional form, and for the state offices as well. So you want to be a little bit careful that you make sure you send the right document to the right candidate. The legislators, for instance, get a legislative candidate document, because that would be really disturbing to everybody, I think, if they got back and they'd prepared for the wrong spot. But at any rate, these documents are all available here.
So how much time do you have to complete these forms and schedule interviews? I'm sure that's the question that everybody is thinking about. So just an overview of our PAC process this year. Today we're doing our training. Next week is the candidate filing week. So any candidate out there is going to go to their local county elections office and put their name in the hat. And by the end of the week, we will know all of the candidates for the elections. And between the 20th and the end of the month, for the Seattle chapter, I'll be working hard on identifying, well, I suppose that Kathy and Cheryl will be sending me completed questionnaires, and as they come up, I'll be pairing together the volunteers for our Seattle chapter, and then sending them out to the folks from there. You should be getting a letter from the Now PAC asking for money after May 26th. So please send your $10 check in. Yes, a check. We don't have a virtual way to do it. Old school here. So typically you have the whole month of June to work on getting your candidate interviews scheduled, completed, and forms returned. Obviously, the sooner you get it done, the easier it is for you and the easier it is for us to organize. But July 2nd is the due date to get all this done. The following week, the Now PAC will meet and identify all of our endorsements, and we'll make an announcement of who we're endorsing for the primary election, which is August 2nd. So I think the last 2 weeks of July, we'll be getting our ballots in the mail. And then once the primary election is over, we kind of look at the board and see who of our endorsed candidates are still in the races. And then if we need to, look for, perhaps maybe there was a race with 2 candidates that both passed, but we decided to interview or to endorse one candidate instead of the other, and the other candidate is what passed the primary election, then we will decide if we want to provide an endorsement for the other candidate for the general election. So that's just something that we might end up doing too later on. September 16th, we will make a formal announcement in our newsletter that will go out to all of our Washington State Now members about who we are endorsing. And then November 8th is the election. And I know we're all really, really looking forward to seeing how midterm elections turn out here in Washington and on the whole country. It's a pretty exciting time. Yeah.
There
So
we
now,
go. Any questions?
how many questions?
Thank you. That was great. I'm just curious, like, what's the typical like number of interviews per week, or just in general that we would host? I know it's dependent on the people but like on years past, is there a general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So last year, I think we had like a record number of volunteers. We had like 30 volunteers, I think. No, it was like 17 volunteers. We had 17 volunteers, and each volunteer pair got 3 to 5 candidates to interview. That was a lot of elections last year. So I'm thinking you probably have about 3-ish.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So in years where they elect city officials, every little city has a,
Or big city.
yeah, but there are a lot of cities. So there are a lot of potential candidates.
Mm-hmm.
There's fewer on even years.
It's not an issue that I'm not actually like a citizen of Washington State yet, is it?
No.
Okay.
Are you a citizen of the country? Are you from Canada?
Yeah, no, I just haven't changed over yet.
I mean, basically the biggest issue, I suppose, is that you share the values of NOW, which if you're a member, that pretty much is our screening process for members.
And then what if you, like, I'm super busy in the next like 3 months. What if you like just physically don't have time to conduct some of those interviews?
I think at that point, communication with your volunteer that you're paired with is super important. And that's one of the community agreements that we have on our Seattle chapter that we reiterate with our board, every board meeting too, is just be professional, be open and honest about what your capacity is. We don't want to stress you out. We need you to volunteer if you can. But if you can't, just, let me know if I'm assigning you a volunteer pairing or your other volunteer right away, so we can make it work. Yeah, the candidates tend to be pretty flexible because they really do want the endorsements. They try to accommodate you, and so hopefully you can get paired with a person that's got either a more flexible schedule or one that's congruent with what works for you too.
Yeah, I mean, there's different kinds of work. They're setting up they're setting up the interviews, and maybe you can talk with your partner and have them do those kinds of things, and just be honest and say, look, I can come for the interviews, but that's about it.
Yeah, this is how I got started with the Seattle Now chapter last year, is that I did interviews, and I actually found it really rewarding. I only ended up doing just one, but it was a port commissioner, and it was just so cool, that's the word I'm going to use, to be in the room and just to ask him questions. And it was so human, because not only did he have his spiel, but we were able to ask him, detailed questions. And it felt good. And he ended up being on the Port Commission. So even if you get to just do one interview, it's like a life lesson almost. It's the fact that when we vote every single time, so Maria, you have to change your address, right, girl? And make sure you vote. But every time we vote, you can literally think, okay, this is what I'm looking for. So it is a life lesson for all of us that we can share. So yeah, at least try one interview.
Yeah, and I think that's another good reason to have 2 people too. When I did it last year, I interviewed 3 people. 2 of them were representatives were candidates for running against each other for the city that we all live in, and one of them was my friend. And so I did my best to be. It was very easy to be objective. but I really did sit, we knew, all three of us knew that that she and I had a personal relationship. And so I really stood back and tried to be a little bit more less involved with that kind of thing. So, I mean, you're going to be doing local, as well, as much as possible, local races, people that are running for to be your representative, and maybe you will know them, I mean, that can happen. And so that's why it's good to have two people.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for the questions and hanging out with us this morning, I guess. For our chapter, the Seattle Now chapter, the next steps are really just hanging tight until we get the screening questionnaires back, and then I'll start emailing you. So check your junk mail sometimes. I don't think my mails usually go there, but I send a lot of emails sometimes.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy your day, and hopefully you can hit the streets and use your voice in the streets today too.
Yeah, if you want to come up to, this made it possible for me not to come to go to anything down in Seattle, but up in Linwood, there's something happening at 2:00. If you want to drive up here and get a sign and go out, right in front of a crisis pregnancy clinic, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Very, very good place for it.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for coming. Bye.